I was lucky enough to get a code to play Q*bert Rebooted the other day, and as it's a reimagining of a much loved title, I thought I'd take this opportunity to start a new series of videos called Retro Revivals. Developed by the duo of Galaxy Pest Control and Gonzo Games, Q*bert Rebooted was released earlier this week. It's currently available on PC and Mac through Steam, with iOS and Android versions coming soon. I'll start by saying that I'm well aware that it's hard to revive something like Q*bert, or indeed any beloved title. This is largely because these games have to walk a tightrope in order to be considered successful, as either the formula is tinkered with so little that it makes the experience as pointless as a chocolate teapot, or that the developer makes a game that's so different to the original that they may well have used a completely new IP. Some games that I think have walked this tightrope successfully include Space Invaders Extreme and Pac-Man Championship Edition. Sadly, Q*bert Rebooted doesn't join these great reimaginings, but it's far from a complete failure. The original title is included here in all its dusty glory, as you'd expect, and I'll take this opportunity to explain how the game works, for those out there who don't know. You play as the titular Q*bert, who resembles an orange gumball with legs and a long snout, and also peddles a good line in nonsensical gibberish. Anyhow, you're dumped into an isometric arena, and are tasked by painting all the squares of it a specific colour by stepping on them. Once you've done this, you move on to the next stage. Complications come in the form of a small suite of enemies. These include a snake named Coily who chases after you, and Slick, who changes squares back to their original colour. I won't beat around the bush here, this offers up a tough challenge, and not one I personally savour, having been mollified by modern games. Fortunately, one of the key changes in the reboot is making the game a little more forgiving. It offers 36 levels, with each of these consisting of 3 stages. You have 5 lives to complete each trio of challenges, and then once they're done you can move on to the next set. I will add that you do have to play each level thrice and achieve a different objective each time to gain the full quota of stars though. You have to beat the level, then beat it within a set time, and finally achieve a minimum score while completing it. And yes, gaining those stars is necessary, as you'll need specific amounts to unlock later levels. The game does make things more accessible by employing hexagon tiles rather than the squares of the original however, making it simpler for you to avoid foes, and also allows levels to be a little more varied in their layout. The other main change is the 3D makeover, which I'm actually fairly indifferent towards. 2D visuals and sprites will always stand the test of time after all, but these tarted up 3D visuals are solid but a little charmless in places. It doesn't help that there's some rough edges here and there, like the way that models just mesh into each other like they're made of liquid metal. What is this, a T-1000 convention? They should probably have just stolen the Q*bert character design straight from Wreck-It Ralph. I am concerned at how Q*bert looks so worried throughout too. I mean, look at him on the level select screen, he's clearly terrified. And I suppose who wouldn't be, when faced with the prospect of having to jump around tiny arenas painting tiles for eternity, while being chased by snakes and a never-ending cascade of red balls. I feel for the guy. But finally, I'll address what is my biggest problem with this reboot. I don't think the core concept of Q*bert is that much fun. Now I'm aware it's considered a classic title by many, but if you ask people to name the arcade machines they loved as a kid, I doubt many would say Q*bert first. And there's a reason for that. The gameplay is repetitive and simple, but you expect that from an older title to some degree, yet you also expect what is there to be enjoyable to combat this. When you shoot a tricksy space invader for example, that's fun. When you chomp a ghost in Pac-Man, it's satisfying. When you paint a tile in Q*bert though? In Q*bert there's very little that you'll savour doing over and over again. Luring a Coily to its doom is amusing at first, but it's tempered by the fact that one usually comes back in a few seconds to replace it. Then there's of course Slick, and these sunglasses wearing cretins really know how to put a crimp on your day. There is nothing worse than being so close to completing a stage and then having one of these guys turn up at just a millisecond before you do so. In the latter stages of the rebooted version I really do feel that developers went overboard with these, and I have no idea how I managed to complete some of the stages when a plethora of them were unleashed upon you all at once. It also manages to introduce enemies that are almost as annoying, largely due to the fact that they're invincible. Homers that follow you around constantly and feed on the smallest error? Wonderful. Uppercuts that wallop you off the arena whenever you get anywhere near them? Delightful. This means that whenever you clear a stage, the overwhelming feeling is relief, and I was just happy to finish the game in the end, which is definitely not how things should be. When playing the original you expect to get wiped out in the space of a few seconds, it's how games were back in the day. But this remake is a bit more cunning, and draws you in with an apparently smooth learning curve, but is soon smacking you around the chops repeatedly until you just can't take it anymore. And in many ways that's crueler. There's the usual modern gaming trinkets on show such as unlockable characters and achievements, but it all feels a bit tacked on, There's no difference to the characters beyond the cosmetic, for example. Things like this mean that the game feels like it's been made with precious little inspiration, despite the underlying mechanics being pretty solid. For the asking price of £3.99 or $4.99, it's probably worth a shot for those who are a fan of the original, but for anyone else it's not something to get too excited about. So yes, Q*bert Rebooted is a bit of a disappointment, with the most positive thing I can say about it is, hey, it could have been worse. And that perhaps says it all. I don't know about you, but I'm so glad I live in a world where something like this exists.
Phew! I thought I was a goner for sure.